Hello. We're going to, you can continue to eat and get your desserts or whatever is there. We're going to start with our next speaker, a speaker most of you would never have seen before in terms of speaking. And that's true for a lot of people here. Geoff is not here by mistake. He's here intentionally, and we've chosen intentionally to come and speak to you now. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the brochures that have been done up by our team down at the back. There are secretaries, they've done this. And in that brochure, very nice brochures, there's a little discussion of Geoff Eaton. Geoff Eaton is the Executive Director of Young Adult Cancer Canada. But I think, independent of that, I think the little spiel he's got there tells you a lot that you need to know about Geoff. Geoff says, you know, he was talking about when he was diagnosed first and given a 2% chance of living. He's still here, but he says 1% gives you a sense of the individual. 1% is better than 0%. Well, as an economist, I can tell you 1% is infinitely better than 0%. That's an economics joke in case you don't get it. If you divide by anything by 0, you get infinity. But, you know, okay. Well, I didn't say it was funny. It was just a matter of this gentleman is here. I met Geoff. I saw Geoff on TV many, many times. He's a very inspirational guy and has done a lot of good work. And he has benefited from the university. He's clearly not understood the role of academic debate and the cut and thrust. He brought his hockey stick. So I'm not sure why he has his hockey stick here, but he has his hockey stick. So it might be a little more physical than we're used to having, but that's okay. That's okay. Anyway, Geoff is going to come talk to you, and he'll answer questions, and you will be impressed with what this individual can do and does. And Geoff, please.
Do we have the timer here, Wade?
Is there a timer?
He's an hour.
You take this one time.
Did you hear that? Wade just said I can take as much time as I need.
I'll sit here.
With as much time as I need within limits. Within whose limits? Within my limits. Thank you for the introduction, Wade. Thank you for the invitation to be here. Thanks to my buddy in the back for hooking me up with a wireless mic so I can walk around. I will jump in front of the screen every now and then. I'll try to remember to turn it off. I do much better when I can walk and talk. Behind a podium is not my best setup. So I am here to talk to you about Memorial, specifically starting with MUN's impact on me. And then how it has been so directly connected to my work at Young Adult Cancer Canada, and then beautifully, and especially now, an incredible research partnership that we have been able to develop with Dr. Sheila Garland, and some incredibly powerful, life-changing results that have come from that partnership. And of course, I could not come without providing a few pieces of unsolicited advice as you continue your thinking and work and debate. So that is where we're going to go today. Really, this is about MUN and how it has literally changed my life and the lives of thousands of young adults who are dealing with cancer like I was at one time. This is me on a graduation day in the treehouse, very triumphantly celebrating my graduation from, I was actually in the first class of for the Bachelor of Business Administration program. And I was actually really this close to missing MUN, because as I was getting ready to leave high school, I was very confident, however authentic that was, I don't know, but I was confident that I could be successful and chase my dreams without a university education. So I was really debating whether or not I needed to take this step. I actually am well surrounded in my family in particular by successful entrepreneurs who have very little formal education, a lot of schools of hard knocks, and in particular my grandfather Sparks was a really powerful example for me, a grade 6 education, but an incredibly strong work ethic and a desire to move things forward. My dad is a Mon grad, engineer. He thought it would be really good for me to take that step and go to Mon. So eventually I did follow his advice and decided to apply to Mon. And it was an incredible 5-year experience for me to be within the walls and the environment of Mon at that time in my life, as I know it is for so many. For me, the thing that I found I could reflect on that day in the treehouse, I really had this awareness that as I came into Mon, it was really this naive, joyous, I was a pretty happy kid, optimistic, anything is possible kind of guy. And as I left, it became much more about this explicit, energetic confidence that I had in myself. And I remember feeling that transformation while I was at Mon, and particularly in the business school. Back then, it wasn't a big, the co-op office wasn't a big fan of you using your own business as a co-op work term. So I actually had to make a choice when I had started my own little business, my first business after my first work term, whether or not I'd stay in the co-op program and ditch my business or follow this new path that I was on. So I chose this new path. Gary Gorman was a great help in that regard and transitioned me over to this new program that was arriving just in time for me. So it worked out beautifully. The classroom, of course, success and lots of failure. Faculty government was fun for me and pushing my limits anywhere I could find them. That was really what Mon was about for me. And then this transition to the entrepreneur that you were seeing in that picture was really about this feeling, of course, in my mind, which many of us have when we're 22, was this feeling of invincibility mixed beautifully with possibility. And that is really, really how I felt as I was leaving Mon. Extra special thanks to just a few of the incredible people who helped me during my time at Mon and in my work since. Catherine Gallagher, Gary Gorman, Lynn Morrissey, Jim Barnes, and Donna Stapleton, and there are many others, of course. Shortly after I was finished at my time at Mon, I was at a friend's business reception, and I was having this great chat with a gent who I'd never met before. He used to tour with the Rolling Stones as a roadie. It was an incredibly engaging, unexpected discussion at my friend's grand opening of his business. And in the middle of that chat, I felt weak in my gut. It's not something I'd felt for months and months. And I just started to get lightheaded, cold sweats. And I turned around to lay my drink that I had in my hand on the table behind me, and I passed out. I fell back, and I actually hit my head on the wall behind me. Because I hit my head on the wall, my buddy thought I should go to hospital for observation, so that's what I did. So I hopped in the ambulance, straight to hospital, the Health Science Center, of course, up the road, and in I went. I had a blood test. I saw a nurse and a doc, and a nurse and a doc, and then we got the results of the blood test, did another blood test, another doc, another nurse, 4 or 5 hours. My next move was to pull one of the two, ironically that night, Drs. Patel, they were both there that night, to pull one of them in and say, Doc, I got a really busy week next week, and on Monday night, actually, I have a really important meeting, so can we make a deal here? Can you and I make a deal? Can I get out of here by Sunday night? And super gentle, both those Drs. Patel, but he took my hand as I was lying on the bed, and he looked me in the eye, and he really answered me with his eyes. I'll never forget those eyes. And he just very simply and gently said, "You're not going back to work on Monday." So I had to do what I call adjust the bar. I had to let work go on Monday. It would turn out that I would let work go for 18 months. So a couple of days later, still in hospital Sunday morning, first conversation with a lady who I have now come to know and love dearly, a Dr. Scully, having a conversation that was kind of ambiguous, 15 minutes. And my family don't hang out in ambiguous for a long time. So after 15 minutes, my mom kind of stopped and said, "Dr. Scully, what do you think it is?" And they didn't have an official diagnosis at this time, but they had a hypothesis. And Dr. Scully said, she said, "Leukemia. We think Geoff has leukemia." So I don't know what my parents were expecting to hear. I certainly was not expecting to hear that. So hearing those words started this process in my head of leukemia. And I didn't know anything about leukemia except there was a kid on ER who had had it a year or two before. And that was my extent of my awareness of leukemia. So I entered into this new world of cancer, and cancer as a young adult in particular. This is me after my first round of chemotherapy, getting rid of the last few wisps of hair. I chose to shave my head with my buddies in my hospital room to try and take a bit of control. It's a big theme of my whole cancer experience. I think it's a theme for a lot of young adults, is you get put in this situation that we really were not expecting. And we look for a bit of control anywhere we can find it. So I'm in this space, and I was faced with a lot of decisions that first week in hospital, and there were two of them that were truly life-changing and incredibly important. The first one was a strategy, and Wade joked about it, and of course I'm sure some of you are wondering, why did I bring a hockey stick to a talk about the future of Mon and Mon's impact on me? And it really was for me trying to develop a mindset. I had a huge challenge in front of me. I did not know what was ahead, but I had felt intuitively that the mindset that I used to bring to the hockey rink was going to help me a lot in the hospital room. So I created in my head, a virtual playoff hockey series. Me playing cancer. Talked about it like it was hockey, thought about it like it was hockey, visualized it in my head like it was hockey. Incredibly powerful and helpful for me. Every round of chemo was like a game in my series. I was tired from the low hemoglobin. It was like I had a long shift. I needed to change it up. This is the official stick. My dad gave it to me. We did face-offs before my rounds of chemo, of course. I have a jersey that I wore when I played in high school, and a puck my buddy gave me. These things became my tools, and I brought them with me everywhere, and they were super, super helpful for me. This idea of mindset is one that matters, and it matters no matter what we're talking about, right? Including, and of course, especially the important work that you were talking about today and yesterday. Another couple of things that I would learn over time is this different experience that young adults with cancer face. It's not more difficult. If you're comfortable, I'd love to raise a hands for anyone who's had a cancer diagnosis or someone they love has had a cancer diagnosis. Just please raise your hand, and you can have a look around, and you can see how it is super common. Cancer is a huge challenge no matter when it comes. For young adults, because of our stage of life, it creates unique challenges. And in complementary to that, but equally important, is this truth that it takes longer to recover from cancer than it does to be treated for it. This is a universal truth, but you do not hear about this very much in the cancer system. It's a miraculous thing if you actually do hear about it. The vast majority of our resources are focused on that treatment phase, and it's an important phase. But I would suggest to you that our priorities are misguided, and we have focused so heavily on that space, we are literally processing remission, that state where disease is not detectable. We're processing these patients into this state, this physical state of remission, and we are pushing them out the other side, literally left to figure out the rest of their life almost entirely on their own. And for young adults, that is a particularly unique and challenging space. This is me before Game 4. My dad is in the wheelchair. My brother's behind him. My transplant nurse, Bridget, is there. We're dropping the puck. This was Game 4, Princess Margaret Hospital in Toronto. I use the message 1% is not 0% a lot because it applies to my life in so many ways. I really believe it's a message that we all need to hear and be reminded of. On top of the fact that it happens to be true in the economics world, that's a bonus, we'll say. My dad was identified as a perfect match for me. His bone marrow and my bone marrow are a 6 out of 6 on the antigens they test and a 9 out of 12 on the proteins. My parents share 3 antigens. The chances of a child and a parent and a sibling being a match are 0.5%. I often say, including yesterday, I am the luckiest guy you'll ever meet, and I know it, and I'll tell you a little bit about that today. This is one of those reasons. My dad was identified as a perfect match for me. We drop the puck, I go in, 3 hours over the course of the 3 hours that afternoon, I got my dad's bone marrow, 1.2 liters of red water is what it looks like. Very simple process for me in that moment. I had had a lifetime dose of radiation that morning and what they call point of no return chemotherapy in the 7 days prior, which means after they give me that chemotherapy, the only thing that will keep me alive is getting a bone marrow transplant. The complications come after, so we move through this place of protective isolation, 2 months out of the hospital, additionally in Toronto, and then I get to come home back on the rock. I miss this place. I love this place. I always have. So I got home, settled into my space, and kind of looking forward to this milestone of 100 days post-transplant. And late one night, I cleaned my Hickman catheter, which is in my chest there. I had cleaned it 100 times before. Pop off the lumens, a little bit of alcohol, flush some blood thinner in it, pop new lumens back on, and go to bed. I'd done it 100 times. I did it this night, late July 1999, about 95 days after my transplant. Unknowingly, in the cuff of my Hickman inside my chest was an infection that I flushed into my body, very directly to my heart, which very efficiently pumped that infection throughout my whole body. So I had a brand new immune system, basically like a baby, and I flushed this infection unknowingly throughout my whole body. So I end up in a really, really tough space. I have an infection that I can't fight because I have a brand new immune system. So I start to lose ground day by day in hospital, originally oxygen and then pressurized mask, and ultimately given a decision and a recommendation from my docs in ICU that I should be placed on life support and in a drug-induced coma to help my body rest so that I could fight this infection. So I agreed to that and went into this coma with the guidance to my family that transplant patients don't do well on life support. I was in that space for 23 days. A couple of days in, my lungs started to bleed and my family was all called in. It was one of those things that we've heard stories about where people thought it was the end and people were getting ready to wrap up and say goodbye, and my family did come in and have those discussions with me. And the doctor said, we don't know if he's going to make it past the hour, so it's going to be an hourly update. And that's what happened throughout this Sunday. And by 2 o'clock that afternoon, for some beautiful reason, my lungs stopped bleeding. And slowly, over the next 20-plus days, they would begin this road to recovery to the point where I was actually able to come off life support by the end of August. Been in a coma for almost a month by that point. Had to rebuild physically and emotionally from that space. And while I was in that space, my docs told my family I had less than a 2% chance of coming out of ICU. But I did, as you can see. So I came out of that space, and I had to do this massive rebuild. The physical part was challenging for sure. The emotional part was more challenging because prior to that, the emotional side of my experience was kind of my strength. But not anymore. Not after this ICU experience in this very, very tough space that I was in and the rebuild that had to come with that. I remind people regularly, but especially my cancer survivor buddies, and I'm glad to add economists and academics to this group today, that stats are sometimes an accurate reflection of the past. They are not necessarily at all a predictor of the future. And we have lots of stories in our community and our work at YAC where this is so beautifully illustrated and true. So after that first experience, I took 6 to 9 months to continue my rebuild. I was off work for a year and a half, as I mentioned. Through the YAC Prime study, I now know that I'm average. Roughly half of young adults are off work 1 to 4+ years. I did not know that at the time. I start an organization called Young Adult Cancer Canada to help young adults that were dealing with cancer just like me. It was a super important step for me to take, and one that I have kind of truly been in love with ever since doing this. I take a lot of credit for the initial step, but literally since that initial step, it has been this huge and beautifully growing team effort. And that is what it still very much is. YAC is here to support young adults with, through, and beyond cancer, and very intentionally chosen are those words. There's a selection of our group or of our community that will live with their cancer for the rest of their life. We hope most of the young adults that connect with us can get to this point where they're going to move through that experience and get on the other side in that beyond capacity, and that is our goal. We are Canada's leading advocacy and support organization for young adults dealing with cancer. Originally in 2000, we were the leading because we were the only. There are small pockets of things happening, but as you will see, this population truly is a forgotten generation of cancer patients, and we are working to try and change that. We are based on Argyle Street, which is up the road, right here in St. John's, Newfoundland, and 6 out of our 7 crew in the office are Mun grads, of course. 4 of whom are over there, 3 of them are Mun grads as well. I want to take a quick moment to talk about my buddy Colin. This is Colin Anderson, a Vancouver Canucks fan living in Calgary. And Colin's story is so special for a whole bunch of reasons. One of the things that resonates is he literally found out that his wife was pregnant with their first child the same day he found out he had cancer. So he's going through this experience with his wife as she's recovering from morning sickness, and he's having treatment for brain cancer. He's having the wonders and the fears of seeing his first child arrive, first steps, kindergarten, and beyond. Collins is a guy's guy, he would say, I would say, and he very eloquently said, a lot of people talk about cancer making them a better person. Cancer didn't make me better. Cancer made me worse. YAC made me better. And Colin's experience with YAC was a beautiful combination of the best of everything that we offer. As he would attest, he went to our website first. He was a lurker, he would say, as many do. youngadultcancer.ca, 60,000, 65,000 visits a year. He went there first, and Colin will tell you he read every single profile on the site. Now over 200 different stories there of young adults talking about their experience and how they've dealt with that. He joined our social media group. We have public pages and a growing private network of groups where these young adults get to connect 24/7. Colin came to a 4-day event. Originally it was a retreat. Then he came back to Survivor Conference. He came to Survivor Conference again. He came to retreat as a peer facilitator, and he was a speaker at conference. And then in 2012, he applied to be the first local life leader in Calgary. This is Colin holding the bowling ball down on one knee with his partner in crime, Michelle. Colin applied. He was trained as one of the original local life leaders in the 4 markets that we started, and he grew that program for 2 years with Michelle, bringing in a whole bunch of new young adults to get access to YAC's programs and to get connected to their peers. The critical step in this process for young adults with cancer is connecting to their peers. Because like Colin and I, most young adults, when they're diagnosed with cancer, they're the only one of their friends to have it. Then in 2014, we got a message from Colin that said something like this, I'm paraphrasing. But he basically said, I'm ready to graduate from YAC. And this is what I would call peak YAC. Like, we are at our best. We want this for all of the survivors that come through our cycle. Colin is still connected in the private groups of YAC. He's still giving his feedback and sharing his stories and his advice with YACers and helping them get to the next step. But he had used YAC to the point where he realized he was back to a place where he was living this life worth loving, and he was ready to move on. And that's a beautiful, powerful space that we worked for every day. When Colin came to that first retreat, he left after 4 days of powerful processing. Powerful processing. But when he went home to this. And YAC does a lot of beautiful things that I just highlighted around our programming. This is the most important thing we do. Because we don't just offer those interventions. We grow and nurture this community of young adults. This is our survivor network by postal codes. So some dots have 1 survivor, some dots have hundreds. Colin leaves the retreat, and then he is now wrapped up in a community of young adults that are just like him. to which he can go to ask questions, celebrate the triumphs, and move through the next phase of his experience and recovery from cancer. 3,200 young adults, we call them Yackers affectionately, have reached out to join this community. It's a powerful, beautiful number, but to put it in context, there's over 205,000 Canadians that have had a cancer diagnosis as a young adult and are living with, through, or beyond that experience. Additionally, every single day in Canada, 22 of those young adults that were like Colin and I learn that they have cancer. And right now, historically, 1 finds yak. So we've got some work to do on that front. Some of you may have heard of the Shave for the Brave. It's our biggest fundraiser. I see many of you in the room with hair. If you ever feel like you need a haircut, I can hook you up with that. We do the Shave for the Brave, and I raise it because, again, it has such a beautiful connection to Mun. So the Shave for the Brave is what you think it is. It's people getting their head shaves or cutting 10 inches or more of hair to donate for wigs. And we host it in schools and offices and communities and hockey rinks all over the place. To date, we've had over 16,000 people participate, raised over $5.5 million to support YAC's programs. And the beautiful part is that this was conceived and launched by YAC in direct consultation with the Youth Advisory Board of ours, made entirely of Mun students and alumni. This is an idea that we started in 2005, built this idea and concept, pushed out into the community in 2006, and it has been a huge part of creating that beautiful map of Canada that we just looked at, providing funds to fuel the growth of this community and this network that we run. The YAC Prime Partnership is one that I want to highlight for a few minutes because it has been so transformational for us as an organization, and we are working to ensure that the data and the findings are transformational for the young adults that desperately, desperately need that. To give you a tops of trees, when we talk about these young adults, I mentioned this idea of forgotten generation. I'm going to take you through that very quickly and highlight just a couple of key points that I think are extra important. But when I'm talking about the Generation F, I'm talking about this population who are diagnosed with cancer between 15 and 39. And people are like, what, 15 to 39? How do you get that? That doesn't make any sense. There's a bunch of reasons why that makes sense. One of them is that if you're a pediatric oncologist at the Janeway, 90% of your patients are under 15. If you're a medical oncologist at the Bliss Murphy Cancer Center here in St. John's, more than 90% of your patients are over 40. You flip that on its head, we are 10% or less of everybody's work. Said another way, we are no one's priority. And you see the impact of that. We see the impact of that. And any metric that you want to measure regarding young adult cancer and the experience, you will see the impact of that lack of priority and that lack of focus. There's over 8,300 of us diagnosed every year in Canada, and as I mentioned, over 200,000 survivors, as we are often referred to, and we refer to ourselves as in this with and beyond phase. So when we're in Generation F, what does that really mean? So it means a whole bunch of things that are not good. We have the lowest survival improvement. We have the lowest participation in clinical trials. We have next to no research agenda. And when I say next to no, I mean 0.4% of cancer research spending in Canada is focused on young adults. That's next to no. It's not zero, Wade, but it's really close. Long-term survivorship is a huge challenge for this population because we're young and hopefully we will live long past our experience with cancer. Dr. Norma D'Agostino on our board, long-term counselor, consultant with YAC and delivers programs with us, she says the first 20 years for young adults with cancer are easy. It's the next 20 that are the hardest, physically she's talking about, because that's when the body starts to break down from all the crazy shit you had done to yourself to keep yourself alive. That's part of the challenge for us. Next to no local support, between 3 and 11, but it's usually hovering around 5 local support groups in the whole country. We keep pretty good track of this. So it's not really, it's not like a local thing that young adults can find in their local space. Most young adults do what I did, and you reach out to the local main cancer support group. You go there, and quite frankly, you end up in a room that looks a lot like this, and you don't get meaningful support from that, so you don't go back. And that's one of the critical things that these young adults want, is they want to connect with people that are like them. And community resources, next to no community resources in comparison to the other parts of this cancer situation we have going on in philanthropy and others. So I'll show you two pieces of this. This is the graph that really started to get people's attention. Years and years ago, Dr. Archie Blyer, affectionately referred to as the godfather of adolescent young adult oncology, a US doc. In the cancer world, particularly after the kids, but in the kids too, the adult system is really good at breaking cancer down into what part of you has cancer. I am suggesting to you that for everything outside of treatment, where you are in your life matters way more than where the cancer is in your body. You got to get the right chemo for the right tumor, we get that. But outside of that, it's the stage of life that drives everything. Survival rates and survival improvement was often looked at based on disease. Archie Blyer, Dr. Blyer looks at it and says, what does it look like based on age in increments of 5? And you can see what this is. This is 1975 to 97, average annual change, so 22, 23 years of data. And you can see what starts to happen when you hit 15 years old and down through 39. And this was a graph when everyone saw it and they thought, how is that possible? How is this population having virtually the same survival rate as when I was born in 1975? There's a whole collection of reasons, but I laid out a few of them before that. Participation in clinical trials and no research are big ones. YAC lives in the community. We are an independent registered charity. We can deliver all of those programs based on the amount of money we raise in the community. Every few years, we look at some of our big brothers and sisters in the cancer world, in particular, on the charitable side, and we look and see how successful they've been in raising funds to support their mission. And this is grade 8 math. This is me taking their top-line revenue and dividing it by the new patients within their mission annually. And you see this kind of ratio you get. Now, represented in here are groups like the Breast Cancer Foundation before it merged with the Cancer Society, the Childhood Cancer Foundation, Prostate Cancer Canada. And you can see how successful these groups have been at raising funds to support their mission. And you can see, again, just like in all these other areas, there's this huge deficit of resources for this population that we're here to serve. We're committed to changing that. Now, specifically when we think about YAC research history, I'm going to talk prior to 2015. So 15 years, our research history was kind of like this. Can we have a letter of support for our young adult cancer research project by the end of the day? Or we would get 1 of 4 to 5 requests a month asking for help with recruitment because we have access to patients. So we would regularly and continuously help wherever we can, which is mostly through social posts and some other kinds of recruitment. But we would hardly ever hear anything from those researchers again. We always had this belief for a long time that we could do something big if we just had the right partner. Karine Chalifour is over here. She's the only non-MUN grad on our program team. She's our program director, honorary Newfoundlander though, and she's really balancing out the Muskrat Falls deal for us, I feel, and I think at the end of this you guys will feel that too. But for years, Karine and I would talk about like having the right research partner. What a big thing we could do. We could really dig into something. And beautifully, Dr. Sheila Garland moved to Newfoundland. And literally, the rest is history. But the reality, of course, with this partnership is we're creating history every day, and we got a lot of stuff left to do. So Sheila moved to Newfoundland, and literally in the middle of the toughest period of our life as an organization, oil had dropped off a cliff the year before. Financially, YAC was in the most intense situation we'd ever been in. And Sheila comes for a meeting with Karine and I to begin discussing the idea of building a research partnership, which we did. We built the relationship first. The research came second. That is the critical cog in the wheel of what we've been able to do. Is we got to know each other first. We got to know our hopes and dreams, our capabilities, the things where we needed work. And then we built this beautiful, powerful, life-changing study together. So when I think about our partnership, I will summarize it fairly quickly by saying we came to it where we both had something to give and something to get. And that was an incredibly important space. I use the phrase win-win all the time, but I feel like in our work at YAC, and this goes to every side of YAC, the program side, the funding side, the volunteer side, I want it to be win-win because just like your marriage, if you feel like you're winning, then you're going to want to stick around and do more good, amazing things with us. And that's what we try to achieve. So this was a key for us with Sheila. Open, of course, was really around being open to the priorities of the other and to the way we work and how we're going to actually work together. Respect and trust, it was super important. And of course, you build those things over time. We come in with a specific amount of that, and then we can grow it if you're doing things well, and that's what we've done. Critically, and this is an important one that I want to say, and I can't overstate how important it is when it comes to expertise, I think one of the most critical things when you're trying to do something big or challenging is to know what you don't know. And I will say that, you know, I have found particularly in the health system, because I've spent so much time there, but also in the academic system, Sheila is the total exception to this. But my observation has been in the advocacy world that I've been in around cancer is this is not a common trait. A lot of people don't know what they don't know. And that wastes a ton of money, a ton of resources, a ton of lost energy and time trying to achieve something. When really, if we can stop and have the awareness and the courage to look for other people who might have the expertise that could help us, it can make a real meaningful difference in our ability to change things. And I say that with respect to Yak and Sheila and our partnership. But I think about yesterday and some of the conversations that we're having about Newfoundland and the province and where we need to go and Memorial's role in that. And just, we have some huge challenges. And I think this is an important thing to keep in mind as we try to take those on. When it comes to engagement, it was really about time. Like, we needed to get to know each other. Like I said, it truly was. Relationship first, research came second. Then we kind of got into action. What are we going to do? How's this going to work? So we offered, Sheila thankfully agreed, that we had the expertise on the recruitment. We had the connection to the survivors. So that was where Yak was leading. Karine and I were not designing instruments and study tools. That is not our expertise. That was Sheila's domain. We fed into that around the content and the issues and the questions, but that was Sheila's area of expertise. So we led recruitment. Very early in our partnership, we came to meet with Wade. And originally we came to meet with Wade to look for some help on the financial side because we really wanted to make that a part of our study. We built this study by us asking questions and Sheila asking us questions, and then Sheila going away to look at the literature to see what was out there. And she would find nothing. So she would come back and say, there's nothing about this with young adults. There's nothing about this. And we literally built the PRIME study to fill in a whole bunch of gaps. As you can imagine, when there's 0.4% of research funding in Canada, and it's mirrored closely in the rest of the world, there's a lot of gaps. So we didn't try to cover all of them, but we picked some key spaces. So we met with Wade, and Wade, through CARE and their connections, were the original supporter of this work with a financial contribution and expertise. A huge boost in the early space for us. And then NL Support became another partner that helped us in this space to take this thing to a next level. So when we got to recruitment, we thought naturally we're going to do this in Yak's way. So that meant us going to our leaders and to our people. So we did it in our unique way. And we're going to have a quick look at a video that is really, this was an internal promotion that we did in what we called phase 1 of our recruitment, which was purely in the private world of Yak. We're kind of like a secret society, right? So we started there, and then we took it out to the public after that. So this was a recruitment video that we did with some of our innovators, if you will, the leaders who were ready to take this on and support the study right out of the gate. So I'm going to try and play this. Am I just touching the screen, my man, or you're going to play it? Mouse click. No. Here, got it. Play. Just touch. Here we go.
I'm sick of this shit.
I'm so sick of this shit.
I'm in the prime of my life, and I'm sick of this shit.
My name is Crystal, and I was diagnosed with colon cancer at age 37.
Stage 4, Hodgkin lymphoma, peritoneal mesothelioma.
I'm taking the Act Prime study because my voice and the voices of my friends need to be heard.
I also want the medical community to understand what it's really like.
I'm taking this YAC Prime study as I want others to understand the challenges that young adults deal with during It's important to connect with other people who understand what you're going through.
I want people to understand what it's like living with cancer for the rest of your life.
I'm taking the YAC Prime study.
I'm taking part in the YAC Prime study.
And I think that things need to change.
I'm in the prime of my life, and I'm sick of this shit.
So this is the message that we took out to the public. So the study is affectionately referred to as the YAC Prime study, the Young Adult Cancer Prime study. But the campaign was really around this idea of we are sick of this shit, of the status quo, and we need your story to change it. And that is what we did. So it was heavily social media based recruitment for us. We connected with our partners across the country and did some of that traditional stuff as well. But the vast majority of this campaign was producing content like that and being able to share it organically and through paid ads to connect with young adults all across the country. And we produced really, really powerful results. So we were able to recruit 622 young adults to this study, which is a huge, huge resource for us that I have learned we will spend years with probing and asking questions to better understand the challenges faced by this population. This study is the largest young adult cancer study ever done. It was done here in partnership with Dr. Sheila Garland and YAC on Argyle Street in St. John's, Newfoundland. It is producing data that has never, ever been known before about the challenges, specifically the mental, the social, and the financial challenges that are facing this population. I'll take you through a few of those things in a second. So when we got into this space around how we work, it was really about also, as the data starts to come in, this notion of translation and patience. Man, we're in the meetings and talking about the latest findings, and we would hear one version, and then I would say, like, can you translate that for me? Like, I don't know anything about all these scores and values and this. And so it was a lot of that kind of communication back and forth, and the patience on the researcher side, for sure, was essential for us to be able to have that kind of communication and to be able to build that relationship. Super collaborative. We didn't, just because we were leading recruitment, doesn't mean that we said to Sheila, super good, we got the budget for recruitment, off we go, we'll see you in 6 months and we'll come back when we got 600 plus young adults, which was the goal. It did not work like that, of course. We led collaboratively with Sheila. And then on the dissemination side, again, this is a space where YAC is leading heavily, and we're glad to be. Because I've been around the research world a little bit, and there's a lot of data that gets to a conference, to a workshop, to 6 or 12 or 100 people, and that's as far as that goes. And that is a travesty for me. That is 100% unacceptable. Our goal is to do the opposite of that. We want to take this knowledge and get it to the people, and we don't want to take 17 years to do it. We want to do it in a year. So we change our program practice immediately and start to identify, if we haven't been already, the priority areas that we're learning about from the data and make that part of our programs. When we got to this data, we thought there's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of questions we can ask. So we need to do some recruitment on the capacity side so we can get dissemination ramped up. So thanks to Sheila and some of our champions, we built this beautiful YAC Prime expansion team with researchers at University of Toronto, Calgary, Harvard, and Rutgers, and then a bunch of great fellows and students. And they are now our partners in crime digging into this data. And those of you that are into that research world know, as I learned, we find out one thing, and then we got 10 questions about that one thing, and then we find out about it, and it's this continuous process. And that's where we are. We're in this really early phase of discovery and early findings around these mental, social, and financial challenges for this population. And we could not do it without this huge, awesome, incredible group. So when we talk about the latest findings, here's some of what we're finding. Psychological distress is massive challenge for these young adults. We're in this huge space. 47% have moderate or severe distress. Fear of recurrence is a huge challenge. We did not expect to get cancer, so we have extra high fear that it's going to come back. Sleep disturbance, this is Sheila's specific focus. It's horribly challenged for these young adults. And then when we look on work and expenses, you see this incredibly powerful stuff that is super challenging for these people. Half of them are off work for 1 to 4+ years. And they are at a time in their career, if it has begun, where it is early. So many of them don't have the benefits that allow for the leave. And when they do, they're at the bottom of the totem pole. And then on the other side, as income is reduced or negated, they have these increased medical expenses that they have to carry, on top of the reality that rent is still due. They still got to pay the car bill and the phone bill and all those other things of life. When we take it into the debts and asset space, this is a place that is we're going to continue to dig in, but early stuff that we've looked at is they're twice as likely, sorry, back up. I don't know which one of these Canadian surveys we access. I can never keep them straight in my head, but there's a Canadian survey that we use the same tools of. So we got a control group of data. I'm probably not even using that word right. I'm in the wrong room to be using these research terms. We have a group of Canadians who didn't have cancer, and we got financial data on them, and we compare that to our young adult group. And that's what this study's showing. And we've got this showing that young adults under 35, so there's kind of over and under 35 groups, that's how the Canadian StatsCan surveys are grouped, they're twice as likely to have no assets. And when you dig deeper on this asset space in particular, they lag behind in the under 35 group, and the gap gets bigger in the over 35 group. We do appear to catch up on income, but on assets we don't. And in the short term, we felt we could explain that away because we took the trip, right? Like when you just survived cancer, you take the trip and you might do the extra thing. But in the long run, I don't find that to be an acceptable explanation for that. So there's some other sides to this. Challenging on the asset side regarding homes, vehicles, a bunch of stuff. And then on the young adults over 35, things like student debt, 2.5 times more likely to have student debt in the over 35 group. So you can start to at least get a picture of some of the reasons why this asset thing might be there. We have the bad debt, the cancer patients. We have the line of credits, the credit card balances, and even the payday loans, striking the disparity on payday loans and use within the young adult cancer population. So I think this is some of the story that we're learning about, is just how much that financial strain created by this cancer experience encourages, prompts them to access these bad spaces of debt, and we know that is not a healthy cycle to get in. That's a horribly challenging cycle to get in, and one that it appears these young adults are really struggling to recover from. On the connections and the coping, I just want to say that those who feel connected to a young adult cancer community like YAC, they have lower distress, better mental health, less body image distress, and those who do not feel, they have less of the adaptive, in the psychological words, that's the constructive stuff, less of the adaptive coping happening and more of the maladaptive. Also positively, those that are in this space of feeling connected to community, they show stronger results on post-traumatic growth, right? So this ability to create purpose from your experience and move on, and particularly those with lowest social support show the highest score, 4 times the post-traumatic growth scores compared to those not feeling connected. So there's real power in this data, and it's early, and we're excited about it. We released some of this data earlier this year, and in YAC style, we did it with a fun quiz with our buddy Donnie Cody jumping in the poop emoji suit. We did a prime quiz just to ask people and take some questions. We had 300 people take it in 48 hours, which was great. In September of this year, we went to CAPO, Canadian Association of Psychosocial Oncology, and we presented a whole bunch of these papers, 6 or 7 of them, I think. And that was a great step for us, but to be honest, the way YAC viewed that is, we're going to use that conference and the fact that we were there as the excuse to do what we really want to do, which is take the message to the people. We want to reach health professionals, policymakers, and most specifically, young adults dealing with cancer and their supporters. So we used the fact that we were at CAPO to leverage media in markets all across the country, with the data from the study leading, and of course, paired beautifully with stories from that map of Canada that you saw, Yackers on the ground telling their story. 68 million impressions in the last 2.5 months since CAPO, and we are literally just getting started. I will wrap by saying, when you think about the future of MUN, I hope, obviously, that will include excellence in education and the continuing excellence that MUN brings to that. I hope it will resolve in enhanced community engagement. More of the stuff that we are doing with Dr. Sheila Garland, these external partnerships and these stakeholders, more of that. I also suggest the idea to everybody, but especially in this space, that doing less more is a beautiful, beautiful way to think about life. Because in my experience, we actually get a lot further. We can accomplish a lot more if we can stay focused on this. And a perfect example of that, an extreme, crazy example, but a perfect one is this idea of cancer prevention and detection. If I said, or someone was rolling down the street and they said they have this magic pill that can take care of 75% of all cancers. All I need you to do is this magic pill. We'd say they're all crazy, and they would be called a kook, and they'd be laughed out. And I would say to you that in 2000, when I started YAC, I went to high schools all over the Atlantic Canada, in particular in the first 3 years. And one of the things I used to do with them was a demonstration of 10 of them in front of the school. And I would get them up and I would talk to them about the idea of what could we do? Is it possible that we could prevent cancer or detect it early? And back then, in 2001, we had all the knowledge we needed to prevent almost half of all cancers and all the knowledge we needed to detect another 25% of the cancers and treat them to cure. In 2001, we knew that. Do you think we still know it today? Of course we still know it. We're off on a track that is so far gone, and I encourage MUN to play a role in helping us bring us back on track. Some of these problems are not insurmountable, and I think we all got to jump in and do our part. The last thing I would say is step outside your comfort zone, MUN. That's where the growth is. I will wrap by saying thank you for the opportunity to come, Wade. I really appreciate it. This is my friend Liz Entrop. She was diagnosed with stage 4 uterine cancer in 2006. She came to retreat in 2007. She's been connected to YAC's programs deeply since, and she is wearing her shirt because she's still well, saying the future is bright. I hope you will remember that. And an extra special thank you to Sheila Garland. I haven't known where the camera is, if she's even going to see this, but Sheila, you are wicked and awesome, and we're so grateful for the partnership we had with you, and we know that we are literally just getting started. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to come. Only 10 minutes overtime, Wade.
No, we have time for questions. I just want to make one point, though, just so you understand this. CARE did help fund this because it was a very innovative and unique project, and we provided some expertise to help with the financial part. And just so we recognize who that was, it was one of our postdocs that we had work with us, and Mike Clare's son, who's now in Winnipeg.
And still connected, and connected and helping us on the financial side.
And Geoff will answer some questions. We'll go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Glad to. Thanks. I've answered them all. Perfect.
You've stunned them.
Over here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, shit.
That was really interesting, thank you. So I did my PhD in the University of Exeter in the UK, and that was kind of it still is a center of excellence for medical humanities. And I found that when I was studying on the other side of the pond, medical humanities was kind of this massively growing area that I really don't kind of see it existing in the same way here. And I was just wondering if you had any opinions on, like, would it be useful to you to work with, say, historians who can kind of look at the history of what's happened with young adult cancer, or look at narratives through a cancer through an English department, or I guess the kind of contribution the social sciences could make would be a bit more obvious. But is there interest in that kind of research, do you think?
Yeah. Beautiful. So a couple of things, and you tell me if I'm speaking to this, because I was here in and out yesterday, but one of the things I was really struck by was a lady, I think it was Susan, talking about story and the cultural texts, I think was the phrase that was used, and how it can go both ways. Sometimes they reflect what's happening in society, and sometimes you can use them to help create change within the society. YAC has been implementing this really simple strategy from the very first step in 2000, which is share a story and emotionally engage an audience, and then give them an opportunity to act. Repeat. And that is what we do all the time, every day. And what's happened with our partnership with Sheila is we've been able to add this whole other beautiful layer of data. And so that's like supercharged when it's combined with those stories. So to me, that I'm always super curious to think about what we might be able to do on content. The history side of things, I had not thought about that at all, but I'd be super curious to explore what you're thinking there. But the idea of the story, to me, that is what really makes change. And that's how we can illustrate some of the data that you guys have been speaking about in your own context. And certainly that's what we do, every day. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I think you were referring to the talk that I did yesterday.
Yep.
And also to the last questioner. I'm from the University of East Anglia in Norwich in southeast England. And we are just starting, we have been working on the development of the medical humanities. So I think you're quite right about what's happening in the UK. UEA, as the university's known, we're all into these acronyms, aren't we, MUN and UEA, was developed in 1963 when the university started as quite a unique university because it was interdisciplinary. And that was the mandate of the university when it began in the 1960s. Like most universities, we've kind of moved away from that slightly. But interestingly, in the last few years, the university has been moving back. And like most of our funders in the United Kingdom, all of our research councils, like SHERC and many of the Canadian ones as well, are now increasingly, and also the medical research councils, are increasingly funding using thematic, interdisciplinary research ideas and projects. So I think that this really is a time for the arrival and the emergence of the medical humanities. So it's something that we would be interested in hearing. If anybody else is interested in it, please do come and have a chat with me about it. Okay, thanks.
Geoff, brilliant as usual. I think you're such a leader. You're such an inspiration for all of us. So thank you very much. I used to be the director of culture for the province, and culture, even though it's really important in this province, at the cabinet table doesn't have a lot of weight, right? Mm-hmm. So I was talking to my minister one day, and I said, "Look, what can we do to get your colleagues around the cabinet table to understand, and advance our agenda?" And he said, "I need two things." He said, "I need statistics and I need stories." And because you need to be able to tell a broad picture and then to have specific examples. And I thought, well, that's brilliant. You have the stories galore, and with the help of economics, you'll have the statistics. Yeah. So hopefully that'll be what it takes you to get over the hump that you're facing.
We agree. Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. Yeah.
Since we have some time here, I want you to understand why Geoff is here. The kind of stuff that I do is I play with numbers. And so there are lots of numbers, and you forget behind those numbers are people, right? And so a lot of things we do have an impact on people like Geoff, and he's a tangible example of how your work can have a positive impact on someone in the community who then can in turn have a positive impact on other people in the community. So it's important when we have people like Geoff here to take advantage of his insights, his experience, and his innovation as well. So I think that it's important that you understand why he's here. He's here because he's gone through this system, he's benefited from this system, and thank God for Sheila Garland because she's done a lot of good work with him. And it's impressive what these guys have done. And I don't want anybody to lose sight of that. So thank you, and thank you, and thank you.
Thank you, Wade. Thanks, gang.
Yeah, just a quick dumb question.
No such thing.
When you get cancer, you're diagnosed, right? And you go into the hospital and they do their best to treat you, I assume.
Yep.
So is it the stage of life primarily, being a young adult, that really makes the difference when you're diagnosed with cancer in between the ages you mentioned, from 15 to 39?
Yeah. So 15 to 39 is in some respects arbitrary, and in other respects it makes a lot of great sense. But if we just think generally about the idea of young adulthood, and to use my specific example, on November 5th, 1998, the day before I passed out and went to hospital, I was living on my own, pushing my limits anywhere I could find them still, trying to build a company that I'd started a year and a half prior. I was a new grad, and I was, living this life of invincibility. And then the next day, I go in hospital. 3 days later, I'm diagnosed with cancer. And that triggers immediately me shutting down my little one-man consulting shop and settling up with my roommate, who would then find a buddy to come in, and I moved back home with my parents. Those things are unique, and they don't typically happen when you're 70 and 80 years old and diagnosed with cancer. And then resulting from that is a considerable group of shockwaves that happen, some of which we highlighted around the PRIME study: distress, body image challenges, financial challenges. It's not that those things don't exist at other levels when you get cancer at other ages. They're just unique to young adults because of the stage of life.
So it's really a matter of having enough wealth or not having enough wealth at a young age to sort of survive the shock, whereas when you're older, say after 39, you have accumulated enough wealth to sort of absorb sort of the sudden shock of being diagnosed with cancer.
I wouldn't say it's just that. There's no question that there's a wealth financial component of it. And I would suggest to you that even within our study, I don't know if we'll be able to look, and even within the continuum of young adults, that story is very different. I say I was lucky that I was 22 and I had an apartment. How much more intense would it have been if I was 29 married with a kid? I would not have been able to shut things down and move home, and like the responsibilities are even higher. So financial is one part of it, but you can imagine, and there was a beautiful study done several years ago that looked at cancer generally and found that it has the same rate of PTSD as combat veterans do. So that's cancer generally. So when you look at this young adult population in particular, we don't expect to get this disease. So that's why you see things like fear of recurrence and distress so high. It's unexpected for us. It's a very different expectation when you're 70 or 80 because of the incidence rate and your connections. I'm not saying you want to get it when you're 70 or 80.
Yeah, I don't expect to get cancer either, but
That's right. But the stats are there, and if you get diagnosed with prostate cancer and you're 75, the odds are you got a football team of buddies who have had that experience that you know. It's been around you. It's more prominent. And that's just incidence. You can see that just by age. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Is it on now?
There you go.
So you and Yak, absolutely amazing story.
Thank you.
And I think there might be a couple more questions about the economical side and the financial, personal side. I was wondering though, because of your vast network now of youth affected with cancer, have you had any inquiries from big partners in terms of specific clinical trials, getting back at that graph that showed very low survival rates? Has there been, any credible medical partnerships or big pharma come to you and your network to help address some of the issues, the medical issues, in terms of survival?
No. So an important issue and an important question. Our work is really from the moment of diagnosis on. we would definitely participate and have over the years, exhaustively participated in advocacy efforts to help change the experience across the spectrum. But our work is focused literally from the moment you're diagnosed for the rest of your life. There's no question that there needs to be more resources and attention prior to diagnosis and that diagnosis and treatment space. But we have not had those. But we're open to partnership ideas and opportunities anytime they come. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Just one observation on the life course element. The wealth part is I know it's really important and it's serious, but there's another issue when you're younger, which is when there's an adverse life event, cancer, child with a diagnosis, the difference between being 75 and 35 is at 35, you're still planning your life. Mm-hmm. And so the disruption compared to when you're 75, where you've done a lot of things and had the opportunities, it's a very different psychological point to be at. And if we're even doing a narrow mathematical model of planning, the callousness that can come in is we say you've got time to recover financially. Yeah. So if you're going to have a shock, take the risk early, get it then. But psychologically, it may be a very different perspective that, you're watching your peers all going off and doing things and suddenly you're called out and you have a very different life. And so that piece, I think, if there's some way to use social science to draw that out, what's the source of the distress, it might help the public understand more about where our biases come in. And one example I'd raise is the adverse childhood experiences literature that came out of Kaiser Permanente that showed that life events before age 5 seem to be really important for later in life psychological distress and health problems like obesity. And so we have assumptions about how people respond to bad events, but it turns out we don't really know. And that's where I think there's some maybe more social psychological studies that would be helpful for understanding why there isn't more traction for this population. Even though we'll do it for kids, but young adults, we just kind of...
Yeah. And I just build on that a little bit, because I would suggest if I had friends here that work in other areas of not even health, just social, any kind of social cause, but they work with young adults, I would suggest they would be telling a very similar story that I tell with respect to resources and attention and population. And I don't know about the European spaces, but in Canada, we've decided that 16, 17, or 18, depending on the issue, once you get on the other side of that mark, you're an adult and you're on your own. And the resources and attention change fundamentally after that. And that is one of the challenges that cancer is just one example of that. The social justice people would say the same, people with MS would say the same, mental health certainly would say the same. Society, for some reason, we've decided that once you hit 18, you're an adult, and you should be able to figure that out on your own. And you're right, once you cross the street from the pediatric space, the resource allocation, and Dr. Parfrey showed some of this last night on his slides, it's day and night. It's not even day and night. It's like totally separate worlds. So what the solutions are, I joke sometimes that young adults we don't want our own hospitals yet, but in the cancer world, we're 8 times the incidence of kids. I don't know how many people would have come in today before and realized that young adults get cancer 8 times more frequently than kids. Kids have their own hospitals, a big 17 hospital network in Canada, international network. Beautiful resources that we lobbied for that group. And you get cut and you cross the street, and then you just have to fit into the adult system, really, which serves everybody. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you, Geoff. That was a very inspirational talk. And I suppose my question, as societies, I think we're reasonably good at helping people who fall on hard times, and I see the financial information then that you presented about the outcomes that people have subsequently. And I'm wondering, have you had any traction with policymakers or politicians with a view to trying to at least support and alleviate some of those financial constraints that people might subsequently be on?
Yeah, excellent thought. So a couple of pieces on that. This data is pretty new, so we're in this process of understanding it still. And then, from the very first moment we saw financial data, it was really around what can we do to move the needle on this. So we know on the individual level, we can help, because if we can help reduce the distress and help improve the sleep and help them feel more connected to community, then that's going to improve a lot of things. And as you know, it's all connected. So that's one side of that. And then on the other side, with respect to advocating for changes in policy, I think what's happened with most of these young adults is they have fallen into that social safety net of Canada. So that could be employment insurance or welfare, which can help cover a lot of the medical expenses, but not all of them. So then what happens is they've lost whatever level of income that they have had. They fall into this social safety net. This is Geoff's hypothesis now. This is not borne out in the research yet. But, and then they have these additional medical expenses, and life continues on. They have mortgages and other responsibilities that they have to sustain. That results in some other kinds of debt that are not helpful. And then, as you know, you get into that cycle and you're in a terrifically challenging space. That kind of change is a Herculean change for an organization of 7 people to take on across this big, massive country. It doesn't mean we won't, but right now we're trying to still assess what is the best way we can help in this regard, regarding the financial piece in particular, because to me that's such a huge one that if all the other parts of your life are functioning well, but that piece is in disaster, it's going to affect all the others radically. And also I think is probably the toughest one. Furthest outside our expertise, let me put it that way. Yeah. So we're good. Thank you. Thanks, David. I was just, yeah, it's just, I was going to take.
So we're going to start the next session now, and we're